The docking bay smelled of scorched alloy and bureaucracy. Joran never could decide which was worse. He stood on the maintenance scaffold with a fusion torch still buzzing in his glove, staring at the massive ceremonial banner that had been hung across the hangar entrance to welcome the governor's ship. The banner now had a ragged, smoking hole the size of a starship's porthole. "That wasn't my fault," he muttered. The torch sputtered, spitting sparks like it wanted to laugh at him. Seconds earlier, a loose plasma coupling had nearly blown the docking thrusters into vapor, taking the governor's prized cruiser and half the hangar with it. Joran, who was technically only supposed to be fixing a vending machine that kept confusing chocolate bars with spanners, had leapt into the fray with the reckless precision of someone who knew exactly what not to do, but did it anyway. By some miracle, or possibly sabotage of the universe's sense of probability, his gamble worked. The coupling sealed, the cruiser docked smoothly, and the hangar filled with a collective gasp of people realizing they weren't dead. Now the governor's aide was staring at him like he'd just saved civilization. Which, technically, he had, though Joran suspected civilization wasn't worth the effort most days. By evening he found himself herded into the great hall of the colony's administrative dome. Banners draped from the ceiling, holographic projectors spun lazy spirals of the governor's crest, and an orchestra of drones played something that sounded like a toaster and a cello arguing. Joran stood in his grease-stained coveralls, shifting from foot to foot, trying not to draw attention while several hundred elegantly dressed officials pretended not to notice the smell of coolant radiating off him. The governor, a rotund man with teeth too white to be trusted, waddled to the podium. "Citizens of Outpost Klein, tonight we honor a humble hero." Joran scanned the crowd, certain there was some other grease-smeared mechanic standing behind him. "No such luck. Joran Vale," the governor bellowed. "In saving my vessel, you proved yourself resourceful, courageous, and just mad enough to poke at a plasma conduit while it was spitting death. For that, the colony owes you a debt." Joran raised a hand weakly. "Honestly, a repair voucher would." "And so," the governor cut him off, "in keeping with ancient traditions of interstellar alliance, I present you with a reward worthy of your valor." The hall's lights dimmed. A platform hissed upward from the floor. On it stood a figure. She was tall, elegant, and unmistakably not human. Her skin bore the faint sheen of silver under the lights, her long dark hair braided in intricate patterns, and from the sides of her head curved ears that swept back gracefully, catching the glow like polished steel. Her eyes sharp, reflective, more calculating than the governor's accountants, fixed on Joran with the kind of calm that made him want to check if his fly was down. The governor beamed. "Behold, Kayla of the Lethari, she is yours." The hall erupted in applause. Joran's mouth flapped open. "Mine like mine." "Yes," the governor puffed his chest. "A living gift, a symbol of gratitude between species, a reward." Kayla tilted her head, studying Joran as though he were a mildly disappointing menu option. She said nothing, but her lips curved ever so slightly, the ghost of amusement or pity. Joran rubbed the back of his neck. Thanks, Governor, but I'm not sure where to put her. My place barely fits me and my coffee machine." The governor chuckled as though Joran had made a delightful joke. "Nonsense. She requires little. Feed her, shelter her, and treat her as you would a most precious possession." The orchestra swelled. The crowd clapped harder, and before Joran could explain that he had no idea how to care for an alien woman with ears sharper than his wrenches, Kayla stepped down from the platform and walked toward him. Her stride was smooth, her expression unreadable, her presence both regal and inconvenient. She stopped before him. Her voice was low, precise, and laced with sarcasm. "So, I'm your prize." Joran blinked. "Yeah, surprise. I thought I was getting a coupon book." A ripple passed through her eyes, the nearest thing to laughter without sound. "You look disappointed." "I'm not disappointed," Joran said quickly. "I'm confused and terrified. And possibly hallucinating, but that's normal after a long shift." Kayla leaned closer, her long ears catching the hall's light like blades poised to cut through excuses. Then this should be entertaining. The applause died down, the speeches ended, and somehow Joran was escorted out of the hall with Kayla walking silently at his side. He kept glancing at her as if she might evaporate if he blinked too long. She did not evaporate. She did, however, smirk when he tripped over the threshold of the exit. Back at his quarters, a shoebox apartment above the hangar, furnished with mismatched chairs and a fridge that hummed menacingly, Joran dropped his toolkit on the table and rubbed his temples. Okay, so, ground rules. First, I didn't ask for this. Second, I'm not into the whole ownership thing. Third, if you touch the coffee machine, we're going to have problems. Kayla wandered the room, inspecting his clutter with the detached air of someone cataloging a museum of bad life choices. She stopped at the coffee machine, ran her fingers lightly over its scratched chrome, and raised one sleek brow. This is what you consider sacred. Joran sighed. That machine's kept me alive through 6 straight double shifts. Show some respect. She turned away, suppressing another smile. Respect is earned, we shall see. Joran flopped into the least uncomfortable chair. Fine, just don't expect much. I burn toast, I forget laundry, and I have a neighbor who sings opera through the walls every night. Kayla perched gracefully on the edge of the table, her silver-glossed gaze fixed on him. I've been gifted to many things in my life, but never to a man who leads with burnt toast as his defining trait. Joran chuckled despite himself. Well, strap in. You've landed yourself in the shallow end of humanity. For the first time, Kayla let out a quiet laugh, melodic and sharp. Perhaps not as shallow as you think. Joran slumped back, staring at the ceiling. Yeah, well, we'll see how long you last before you beg the governor to take you back. Kayla stretched her long legs, her ears flicking faintly like antennae catching invisible signals. If I must endure your burnt toast, I expect at least a story in return. Tell me how you saved that ship, and do not lie, I will know. Joran groaned. You want the truth, I was fixing a snack machine. Her laughter filled the small room, light and unexpected, echoing against the humming fridge and the buzzing lights. For the first time since the governor's ridiculous ceremony, Joran thought maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the worst thing that had ever happened to him. The morning after the ceremony began with a shriek. Not Kayla's, she was perfectly composed, sitting cross-legged on the floor like some kind of alien monk, but Joran's. He had rolled out of bed straight onto a forgotten spanner which lodged itself neatly in his ribs. Great, he muttered, clutching his side. Death by misplaced wrench. That'll look heroic on the memorial plaque. Kayla didn't move. She simply raised her gaze from the datapad she had salvaged from his desk. For a species that claims dominion over space travel, you humans are remarkably vulnerable to small pieces of metal. Joran hobbled toward the kitchenette. Yeah, well, don't spread it around. The galaxy doesn't need to know we're one Lego away from extinction. The coffee machine hissed as though backing him up. Kayla studied the steam curling from the spout. That device is loud, inefficient, and appears ready to explode. Blasphemy, Joran said, pouring himself a mug. That device is civilization distilled into liquid survival. Without it, your new owner would already be face down in the recycler chute. Kayla tilted her head. Owner, you say the word with such reluctance. Joran froze mid-sip. Because it's ridiculous. You're not a pet or a prize. Or whatever they thought they were handing out. You're you. I don't own people. She considered this, eyes narrowing. And yet, by the governor's decree, I am registered to your name. That makes me yours, at least on paper. Paper can shove it. He set down his mug, trying to look serious while wearing pajamas covered in grease stains. I don't care what the paperwork says. You're not a thing. You're a person. You've got ears sharper than a vibroknife and a sense of humor I wasn't prepared for. That's more than most humans in this building. Something flickered in her gaze, softer than sarcasm but hidden quickly. She stood, smoothing the folds of her dark tunic. Very well, then let us redefine the terms. I will stay. But not as your property, As your house guest. Joran blinked. House guest. Do you object? Only because house guests usually bring snacks. Her mouth curved slightly. Perhaps I shall. By the end of the week, their strange arrangement had already become the colony's favorite rumor. When Joran returned to the hangar, coworkers clustered around him like curious drones. So, said Marlowe, a technician with eyebrows permanently scorched from bad welding, is it true? You've got a Lethari woman living in your quarters. Joran tried to brush past. I also have a refrigerator that sounds like it's dying. Want to gossip about that too? Don't dodge, Marlowe insisted. You're the first guy in history to save a governor's ship and get rewarded with a girlfriend. She's not my girlfriend. Another tech snickered. Sure, and I'm not secretly stealing fuel cells. Kayla, who had followed Joran into the hangar silently, chose that moment to speak. Your coworkers possess a curious talent for incorrect assumptions. The entire crew froze. Kayla walked between them like a queen strolling through an overstuffed armory, her ears glinting in the harsh bay lights. She inspected a diagnostic panel, tapped a control, and made it spit out a line of code no one had seen before. You're welcome, she said simply, then returned to Joran's side. The stunned silence broke into whispers. Marlowe mouthed, "You're doomed," and scuttled away. Back in the apartment, Joran dropped his toolkit onto the floor. You know, when you do things like that, people start thinking you're smarter than me. Kayla stretched languidly on the couch she had claimed as her throne. They are correct. Thanks, real boost to the ego. Consider it balance, she replied. You burn stew, I correct computer code. Together, perhaps, we approach adequacy. Joran pointed an accusing finger. You're enjoying this too much. Kayla reclined further. Only slightly. Watching you struggle with the concept of domestic partnership is a form of entertainment. Partnership, we're not married. Her lips curved again. Not yet. Joran nearly choked on his reheated noodles. Not funny. It was, she said, eyes glinting. Despite his protests, life with Kayla began to slip into a rhythm. She cataloged his clutter, rearranged his tools by some alien system that made sense only to her, and scolded him for attempting to eat ration bars as entire meals. In turn, he introduced her to colony life, the awful cafeteria, the opera-singing neighbor, the maintenance drones that had more personality than their owners. One night, when the power grid flickered under a solar storm, they sat in the dark with only the hum of the fridge for company. Joran tried telling jokes to cut the tension. So, a Lethari, a human, and a toaster walk into a bar. Kayla interrupted. The toaster explodes. Fascinating, she replied. Then louder. Your posture is inefficient. You will damage your spine. He rolled his eyes. Thanks, Mom. Several mechanics across the hangar burst out laughing. One shouted, Hey Joran, your alien girlfriend's already nagging you. Kayla's ears twitched. She stood gracefully, faced the laughing crew, and said in her calmest voice, Correction, I am not his girlfriend, I am his superior. The laughter turned into nervous coughing. Joran nearly dropped his wrench. You're enjoying this way too much. Only moderately, Kayla said, smirking. That evening, Joran collapsed on the couch, exhausted. Do you realize what you did? I'm never living that down. They're going to call me Alien's pet for weeks. Kayla leaned against the table, her silver-glossed eyes flickering. Consider it balance. You insisted I was not property. Now they know you are mine. He groaned. You're impossible. Correct, she replied smoothly. Yet behind the banter, tension simmered. Because for all the jokes, her earlier confession weighed heavily. She was here not just as a companion, but as a link to something bigger, something watching. And as he drifted toward sleep, Joran realized he didn't know what scared him more. The idea that Kayla was sending reports about him, or the possibility that someday she might stop. The alarm came at the worst possible time, which for Joran meant during breakfast. He had just bitten into something that claimed to be a pancake, but tasted suspiciously like insulation foam when the colony-wide sirens blared. Lights flickered, the hollow screen cut out mid-commercial, and a robotic voice announced in monotone calm, "Unscheduled vessel entering orbit. Security forces on standby. Remain indoors." Joran dropped his fork. "Great. Either pirates, tax collectors, or your cousins." Kayla didn't flinch. She set her mug down carefully and tilted her ears toward the ceiling as though listening to something beyond human range. "Not cousins. Fleet." "Fleet?" Joran asked. Fleet, the kind with weapons and serious uniforms." Her eyes shifted toward him, calm but sharp. "Lethari vessel, heavy cruiser class. They are not here for trade." Joran groaned. "Knew it. I saved one pompous governor's shuttle, and now the universe sends in-laws." Minutes later, the colony governor's voice blasted through the comm system. "Citizens, remain calm. A Lethari delegation has arrived requesting diplomatic discussions. This is a routine matter." Kayla murmured. Routine would not involve a warship. "Fantastic," Joran said. "So they're not just here for snacks, they're here for you." Her silence was confirmation enough. That afternoon, officials came knocking. Joran opened the door in his grease-stained coveralls, half hoping they'd mistake him for someone else. No such luck. The governor's aide stood stiffly in the hallway, flanked by 2 security drones. "Mr. Vale," the aide said, "you are requested at the administrative dome. Bring the asset." Joran scowled. "Asset, she has a name. And ears that could slice you in half if she angled them right." Kayla stepped forward smoothly. "I will attend." The aide looked visibly relieved, as though avoiding paperwork involving vaporized limbs. The dome was already buzzing with tension. Officials whispered, guards marched, and above them all, a holographic projection of the Lethari cruiser floated ominously. Joran thought it looked like a knife balanced on the edge of patience. Inside the council chamber, the Lethari delegation awaited. Their commander was tall, armored in a black suit that shimmered faintly like liquid metal. His ears were longer than Kayla's, sweeping back into points that gave him an air of permanent disdain. When he saw Kayla, he inclined his head. "You were not authorized to remain." Kayla's voice was steady. "I was given." "Taken," he corrected. His gaze slid toward Joran, as if trying to measure the man who had somehow ended up at the center of this mess. "Returned now." Joran raised a hand awkwardly. Small problem. She doesn't exactly come with a receipt." The governor cleared his throat. "Commander, our agreement was clear. The woman was offered as a symbolic gift. To revoke that now." "Gifts do not speak," the commander snapped. "She is Lethari, she returns." Kayla's lips twitched faintly, almost a smile. "I believe the humans call this awkward." Joran tried not to laugh, though the sound escaped anyway. "Yeah, this is peak awkward. Maybe we should arm wrestle for custody." The commander's glare could have melted hull plating. Joran shut up instantly. The negotiations dragged, voices rising and falling, threats cloaked as polite phrases. Joran leaned toward Kayla, whispering, "So, do we have an escape plan? Because I'm about 2 speeches away from faking a heart attack." Her eyes flickered with amusement. "Improvisation is your specialty. Surely you will think of something." "Great," Joran muttered. "Alien spy thinks I'm MacGyver." When the council recessed, guards moved to escort Kayla away. That was when Joran snapped. "Wait, you can't just drag her off like she's a piece of cargo. She's not property, she's Kayla." The room fell silent. Dozens of eyes turned on him. The commander regarded him coolly. "You presume much human." "Yeah, well, I'm good at that," Joran shot back. "Listen, maybe I'm not the smartest guy in the room." Kayla coughed softly, confirmed. He glared at her, then continued, "But I know this. She deserves to choose, not be passed around like a souvenir." A murmur rippled through the chamber. The governor looked ready to faint. The commander's jaw tightened. Finally, Kayla spoke, her voice carrying clear and even. "He is correct. I will not return as property. If I return, it is because I choose." The commander's eyes narrowed. "Then choose wisely. With us you are Lethari, with them you are anomaly." Joran muttered, "Story of my life." Kayla turned to him. For the first time, the calm mask slipped just enough to reveal something unspoken, fear, perhaps, or determination. She whispered, "Adaptation is survival." He whispered back, "Then adapt with me." The commander raised his hand and the guards froze. The tension snapped tight as a cable about to break. Joran's stomach knotted. He had no plan, no weapons, no leverage. Just a smart-mouthed alien woman and a coffee machine back home that might never survive this day. Kayla stood tall, ears glinting like drawn blades. "I will decide. Not now, not under your shadow. When I choose, it will be mine." The chamber rang with silence. Then the commander lowered his hand. "For now," he said coldly. "But the fleet does not wait forever." And just like that, the delegation swept out, leaving tension in their wake like smoke after a fire. Joran exhaled shakily. "Well, that went great. Nobody exploded, I didn't faint, and only one diplomatic incident. I call that a win." Kayla's eyes lingered on him. "You are reckless." "Yeah," he said with a grin, "but admit it, I make things interesting." She allowed herself a quiet laugh, perhaps too interesting. As they left the dome, the weight of what had just happened pressed down on both of them. A fleet in orbit, a choice looming. A bond neither of them had asked for but neither could easily deny. And Joran, true to form, broke the silence with, "So, think they'll at least let us finish breakfast before trying to kidnap you again?" This time, Kayla's laughter carried all the way down the corridor. The days after the confrontation stretched thin, like wires pulled too tight. The Lethari cruiser remained in orbit, a shadow on the colony's sky. Everyone pretended it was normal. Cafes still served bitter coffee, drones still bumbled through repairs, but the air buzzed with unease. Joran couldn't even eat his questionable noodles without wondering if a warship was watching him slurp. Kayla, on the other hand, was unshaken. She moved through the apartment with calm precision, ears occasionally twitching as if she were listening to signals no one else could hear. When Joran asked what the cruiser was transmitting, she only said, "Impatience." On the third morning, the governor summoned them again. Joran trudged into the dome muttering about how he should have just let the shuttle explode that first day. Kayla walked beside him, serene as ever. The Lethari commander awaited them, arms folded, ears glinting with disdain. "The time for indecision has ended," he said. "Choose, Kayla. Return to your people or remain as anomaly." The governor looked ready to beg. "Commander, surely." "Silence," the Lethari snapped. All eyes turned to Kayla. She stepped forward, gaze steady. "I have considered. My choice is freedom." The commander sneered. "Freedom among humans. You degrade yourself." Kayla's voice sharpened. "Freedom means not being traded like currency, not being owned. Here, even among